welcome to another Lighthouse Wellness Community podcast. My name is Donald McCone.
My name is Frank O'Connor. This program is designed to encourage open conversation around wellness, mindfulness and healing. As part of the Irish diaspora, Donna and I like to bring an Irish dimension to this conversation. Our hope is to break through the stigma around mental health issues and to bring awareness to the many ways to recovery and to a healthy way of life.
Well, Frank, we're in a slightly different position today. We're like the dueling banjos, if you like. We're kind of looking in each other's eyes because it's been reflected back to us, and it's a fair point that we're talking to the camera when we should be talking to each other.
Yeah, I like that idea. Even though we are, we've always been very cognizant of the conversation between both of us. But I guess from a viewer's perspective, sometimes it looked like we were looking away. So I take that point. That's a good point.
So welcome to a week after lots of activity for both of us, lots of hectic activity, lots of that stress we talked about last week, but we've managed to dissipate all of that because we just have.
Yeah, it's good to leave it. I really enjoyed it, but it's nice to leave it behind. And from your perspective, I know you were doing the parade, and from my perspective, I had two different big venues. One was a dinner dance, and the other one was an open-air concert where I had to bring back all my Irish music, which I love, which was fun. But the stress of trying to make sure everything is right is interesting. And one of the things that happened to me, we've often talked about the technical end of both of our businesses, was with the sound guy. I didn't get a sound check. So when it came to perform, we hadn't done a sound check. And sure enough, the initial 4 or 5 minutes was not very pretty, put it that way. And the old part of me wants to kick in, oh my God, it's not working, this is not good, this looks really bad. But then the other part of me began to talk internally, it's okay, we know exactly what we're doing, just do exactly what you've done before, it will be okay.
I think we had that conversation in that just kicking in that old learned experience that it will be okay, that nobody's died.
It's a good follow-up to what we spoke about last week, actually, on the stress. Yeah, absolutely. Because we had to put it into practice this week.
And thank you for your comments. For those of you who are following the podcast, we really appreciate them. More insight for us, hopefully some insight for you, and certainly lots of learning.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, for the feedback. All your thoughts and writings and email and Facebook, all of it very welcome because it allows us to see where we're going with the podcast, what we maybe need to change, and we're open to change. That's one big thing for both of us. We're here because we embrace change.
So we're talking about how we can move forward with that change. One of the harder things to do, I suppose, with regards to that, if you follow a particular philosophy. Explain what we're going to talk about today.
So what we took a look, and this is a hard one. It's a hard one for us, and I'm sure it'll be a hard one for many people out there, is the idea, the concept, or the principle of making amends for harm that we've done to other people and indeed to ourselves. And that takes some courage, and it takes a lot of self-inquiry, self-thinking, self-examination. What are the things in my life where I've hurt other people intentionally, and indeed some of it comes later through the self-inquiry process, things that might have even been not so much in the forward consciousness, but as I do the self-inquiry, starts bubbling up to the surface. So we wanted to talk about that today for sure. A good example of it is what's called a living amends. And again, anybody out there who has any access to any of the 12-step programs or many other recovery programs will know exactly what I mean. So living amends simply means I know what I've done. I know how I've messed up. I am sorry about that. And from this moment forward, I will live my life from a different perspective. And a beautiful way to make a living amends is to live our lives in a constructive, positive, loving, caring way, and to do it with full intent as a living amend. Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. It's that kind of, it's the lesson of if you live a truthful life, you don't have to have a good memory because there's nothing behind that's going to come up and catch you because you've lived a truthful life. you don't need to make up things because you've lived it in the way forward. Is that's
Yes.
kind of the same thing?
Yeah. It's the living amends simply is the commitment to live the new way in a constructive and committed way from this moment on.
How far back do you have to go? I mean, are we talking to go right back to earliest memories, or is it a simple case of let's look back slowly and see what emerges?
A little bit of both, Donna, because it's a slow enough process because some things don't come to mind. Again, I'll speak about myself, my own experience. As I began this process of looking at myself, acknowledging the harm that I did both to myself and to many, many other people, the big things come up straight away. They're obvious. They're sitting right there. They've caused disturbance in my life from a long time and needed to be dealt with. But as I went along that process, older things began to emerge, even things where maybe I was much younger as a boy or, pre-teens, where I realized, oh my gosh, even then there were things that I was doing that were self-centered, selfish, egotistical, that even then was causing pain or harm to other people. Not saying it's necessary for everybody to do that. I can only speak about myself. But the obvious, glaring ones are the ones to deal with first, because in truth, they're having an impact on my life today if I choose not to address those situations where I did harm.
There's an interesting fact that would lead me to think, is it doing harm to my life now? Or is it something that's emerging? Because the nature of digging means that you unearth things. If you're built on a very strong foundation, to use a metaphor, that's great. But what if it kind of makes you feel uncertain and crumbles away at the very foundations that you thought you'd built up?
There is a caveat, and it's a very important one, and that is accept when to do so would injure the people we're trying to make amends to or other people. So an example of that might be a husband who's had affairs or whatever. You have to really walk the talk on that one and think it through and make sure that in the process of saying I'm sorry and making amends for that, you're not going to harm somebody else.
Who perhaps didn't know about it?
Exactly. And that's not to take yourself off the hook by any means, because what you can do in that situation is go talk to somebody else who's that third party. The old Catholic idea of confession, and I think about that. There was a logical reason for a safe space to go where I could unburden and say, look, this is what I've done. I realize what I've done. I've harmed other people, and in the process I've harmed myself, and I really don't want to live that way anymore.
Now, it's not going to be easy, but by the same token, does it have to be self-flagellation, where you get to the point where you're beating yourself almost to death or almost to distraction?
So the primary reason for doing this is to live a clean, basic, peaceful, fruitful life. So it's not the self-harm, it's the self-nourishment. It's for my own. An example. You owe money, or I owed. Give me an example. I owed money to a bank a long time ago, and went to pay it back because I realized, wait a minute, I'm not going to walk away from this. I'd let it go for a while and I'd not addressed it, and as part of my recovery process, wanted to make amends and clean that up. And the funny thing was, the bank manager said to me, Frank, this loan was written off totally by the bank, but now that you've come back in, I have to kind of reopen the book, right? So, and I had to explain to him that the reason for doing it was for my own well-being, and it takes the ego out of the process. If I go to you or somebody else that I have harmed and say, Donna, I am living a life today that's bringing me peace of mind. I want to continue living this life. It's very important for me to live this way. And I need to say I'm sorry to you as part of that recovery process. Then there's no great ego involved in me saying, look how great I am saying I'm sorry to you. It pulls that out of it. So it's all about true self-nurturing.
This is the toughest thing we've had to do of all the conversations we've had. I can see many pitfalls. If I think of my own circumstance, I don't need to go to anyone else's circumstances to do that. He without sin, if you like, cast the first stone. And yet, part of me says, we're back into that kind of world of where we came from, where we were beating ourselves up for sin, or we were beating ourselves up with judgments that we made against ourselves. But this is something more than that. This is not about recanting your sins. This is about, it strikes me, this is illumination. And anything that illuminates that darkness that you've built up around those circumstances is healing.
Yeah, let's bring light. Two things I would say. One, being the person who's made amends, and I've certainly done that. I've had that opportunity with my ex-wife and with my children to go to them and say, look, I know what I've done. I know I've caused grave, serious harm and pain to my family, to my people. And acknowledging that. And that was very painful, truthful, and yet cathartic, because it opened up. It's almost like you opened up a door and brought the light in. I felt that at the time of doing it. Now, I've subsequently had the opportunity, and this week actually, of somebody from my past coming back to me and making those amends. So I see it now from both sides of that fence, and it is extremely powerful on either side of that.
What was the difference in the experience for you? You knew you were, if you like, in control of making those amends. You were the person directing those. So you knew kind of the areas that you were going into. When someone comes to you with what their interpretation of all that happened, if it's an individual or a group of people, it must be a very different perspective and give you a different perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that struck me was I acknowledge the courage of this person. I recognize and acknowledge the courage that this person had to have to come to me. And it's an opening. So it also led me to realize that when somebody approaches me from a humble place, forgiveness is almost automatic. I want to immediately go to forgiveness for that person because I now recognize what they're trying to do. And I'm trying to do both sides of that. In me making amends, I opened the door for my family. In somebody coming to me, they opened the door for me to be able to forgive and to be able to accept with an open heart the purpose or the desire of that person to clean away the wreckage, clean the wreckage of the past.
It's both sides of that very big story, and it's one of the most important things in my life, the idea of forgiveness. Whether I've come to that awareness through circumstances where I've read about it much deeper, and I found it very empowering and powerful. Some ways, to the degree that you're talking about, really investigating how I needed to ask for forgiveness. That's the hardest part of it all. The giving of forgiveness is it depends on how you've seen the situation before. That seems to me the easier part, and yet they're exactly the same.
That's the surprising thing. If I were to, some time ago, look at it and say, here's the scenario, Frank. In this position, you're going to ask for forgiveness. You're going to acknowledge your wrongs and you're going to ask for forgiveness. In this second situation, you're going to be the one who's forgiving, who's giving. Which one will be most beneficial? They're actually both the same. I would not have said that before. I wouldn't have known that before. But in my experience of both sides of the fence has been equally healing, equally cathartic for both sides of the fence. So lets me be much more aware of how important it was for me to do what I did with my family and with other people. Obviously, my family, my children, my ex-wife are the first people that come to mind. Then my siblings, my parents, and I've done it with those guys too. There's probably some more bits and pieces that need to be cleaned up. And that's the ongoing process. peeling the onion that we've talked about before, Donna. If I take the first couple of layers away, and I'm like, oh, look at that, there's another layer. Until I removed the first 3 or 4, I didn't know that 5th layer was there, but there it is. And that could lead me to, the next time I see that person, I'm going to tell him I'm sorry.
What about those people who are no longer here, whether they've moved geographically, whether they've moved into that next life, as it were? How do you address that part of what you want to do?
So there's a couple of suggestions on that one. A good one is to write a letter. Just take a few moments, sit down. For example, if it's mom and my mom, dear mom, here's what I really would like to say to you, and just pour it out on the paper. Because it opens that door again. The process has begun, and it allows it to unfold. If somebody's in a situation that maybe, again, I'll go back to, except when to do so would injure ourselves or somebody else. If in the process of doing that I'm going to injure myself, I have to think very carefully. So, again, I can write the letter for sure. I can acknowledge it in a spiritual place in meditation. Speak to that person, spirit to spirit, soul to soul. And I can then get hold of a third party, a good friend, a priest, a rabbi, whatever, if you're in religion, or just somebody who you totally trust, and pour it out that way. There's always a way to make amends, but you have to think through it and do not do it in a way that's going to harm yourself or somebody else.
I'm sure you've come across a few intractables when the physical approach has been rebuffed. That must be a challenge in itself.
Yeah, there's no guarantee how the other person's going to respond. And I have one case, I'm smiling because I have one case in mind that exactly happened. And I go back to what my mentor said to me. Going in to any of these situations, Frank, where you're going to make amends, or you're going to say, I'm sorry, you're going to ask for forgiveness. Realize, walking in the door, I'm doing this for my own benefit. Let there be no doubt about it, that you're not trying to be, St. Francis of Assisi, right? We're doing this because, seriously, I need to live this way. If I want to stay alive and live in any way that's normal and peaceful, I need to do this. So that's number one. The second thing is, once you realize that, it doesn't matter how the other person or people receive. And I had one case where I poured it out, and I felt I thought it through a long way. And the reaction coming back was zero. Just nada, nothing. And the initial twinge is, whoa, that's a little harsh. That is a little harsh, and I'd love to hear something. But having to walk away and then realizing, going back to my mentor and working through it, that the job was done. The job was done. I had another situation where I had been harmed as a child and went back to see somebody from that situation and spoke about it. And they were unable to acknowledge what had happened. So kind of both sides of that fence too. Either way, I can do only my part. I can only do my part and then release and let it go.
The giving is to yourself in that stage, as you were. You've no right to predict the outcome, is basically what you're saying. Even though we think, well, if I do this, this will really change the situation. What you're saying on occasions, it won't change that dynamic, but it changes your dynamic. And that's the one that you have to work through, and that's the one you have to be honest to.
Will it change what's happening in here? Because the resentment, the refeeling of things can be a huge problem. We spoke about that. Resentment comes from the Latin word resentire, to refeel. So somebody says or does something, and I immediately think, wow, I wonder why they did that or said that to me. Then 3 days later, I'm thinking, she's no right to say that to me. And a week later, I'm thinking, who does she think she is speaking to me in that way? Right, and on it goes. So a big part of the amend process is changing what's happening in here. Losing resentment, letting it move to one side. Losing anger, letting it move to one side. Losing self-justification. One of the toughest ones is the moment I can give you reasons for why I feel angry and really upset with another human being, I'm going to self-justification. Because I'd always find reasons why. But your question is very valid, because what is that doing to you, Frank? What is that process doing to you? So by cleaning it up, I give myself freedom.
Are there easier bits and pieces to do? I mean, we want to encourage anyone along that route. There are many who are on that route anyway. Well, is there an easy way to get started? Is what I'm really thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and starting is the journey of 1,000 miles starts with 1 foot forward. It's the simple things, and anybody can bring up to mind. I mean, the ongoing process of living that process. And I'll start at the end and go to the beginning. So the final process is that during the course of any given day, if I'm wrong, I will admit it immediately and make amends. So that happens to everybody on a daily basis. So somebody says, or I say, or do something, it's like, that was not good, Frank. That was really not good. Can I simply go to that person in the moment and say, I'm sorry? And in the moment for some people could mean the next day, or maybe a month later, or maybe 6 months later, where I'm eventually able to say, look, I messed up there. I'm sorry. And that's it. So we can begin the process anywhere. By beginning my process, it certainly did open up the book. You know, I was on page 1 through 10 and I had a list of all these people. But as I began to go through that process, there were more names being added, right? Because the awareness says, I have another one for you, Frank. I think you can handle it now, right? But you could not have handled it in the beginning, right?
Practice is making perfect. Unfortunately, you've got many imperfections to kind of pull on. I'm not just saying
No,
you. I'm saying
God.
you, as in the human being in general.
Yeah.
We're not pointing fingers. You've already risen many thoughts within my own head of needs to exactly follow that process.
And, you know, I'm not done. I'm not done. I have many of the major ones out of the way, but there's some more for sure. There's some, and some I'm waiting on an opportunity to either see that person again or choosing the right setting. Sometimes the person might be in front of you, but there's 10 other people, and that's not appropriate.
So lots of work to do and move forward. I'm talking about myself here.
Hands
well,
up.
we're in the same
Hands
boat.
up, yes.
We're going to do meditation now. We're at about that time, yeah, just about looking at that. So meditation today will reflect that.
So we'll go to a simple forgiveness process today in the meditation. Yeah.
Can never go wrong with that.
No, because the forgiveness is on both sides. It's forgiveness from the other person, forgiveness to the other person, and then equally important, self-forgiveness. Particularly if I'm walking a path, a spiritual path, an enlightened path, a path of positivity, a path of doing the right things, whatever label you want to put, everybody knows what walking the right path means. If I'm on that path, forgiveness of self is a critical
Can we just kind of finesse that, as it were? When you're saying forgiveness, forgiving yourself that, well, let's be honest, you did the best that you could at that particular time. Forgive yourself for being harsh on another. Forgive yourself for being harsh about being harsh to another. Does that make sense?
It does, and I'll give you a great example. I remember looking at a show on TV, whatever, in the last week or two, and there was a young boy who was really out of control. But then they gave the backstory. They gave the story behind why this kid was highly dysfunctional. And when you see the backstory, you now go to compassion, because you're like, oh my gosh, I understand why that kid is so disturbed or out of balance or whatever. So when I go back and look at young preteen Frank, when I go back and I look at teenage Frank, I have to go to compassion. Because if I look back and knowing what I know now, I have to be careful because it sparks. Not careful, I'm sorry, I'm just getting emotional. If I look at young Frank, given the circumstances, I have to forgive that kid because he there was much he didn't know. There was so much he didn't know.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome, Dan.
Appreciate that. So we'll move to the meditation.
Yeah. We'll just spend the next few moments, next 10-15 minutes in meditation. So stay with us. Okay, folks, welcome back to the mindfulness part of our program, mindfulness and meditation. So initially, just get comfortable, whether you're seated or lying down. Some people actually meditate lying down, and that's okay. So take a moment and breathe with me. We're going to breathe in deeply to the count of 5. Hold our breath for 5. Breathe out to the count of 5. And then hold again for the count of 5. So follow along with me. Breathing in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Release the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now hold again. Hold the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's a box breathing process. So let's do that again. Breathing in. Holding. Breathing out. Holding again. Breathing in. Holding. Breathing out. And holding. And now just proceed to breathe normally. Let's take a moment to put our focus on our bodies. Bring our awareness to our physical being, the vessel that we live in. Feel your feet firmly planted on the ground if you're sitting. Feel your bottom sitting on the chair or on the floor if you're lying. Just feel the support of that. And feel your head sitting on your shoulders, balanced and resilient. What we're looking for in our body is just an awareness of how it's being held. And what we're looking for is relaxation and ease. Your body should hold your head like it's sitting on the top of a Lego set, perfectly supported and at ease. Now, when you feel comfortable, we're going to go on a journey. To begin this journey, just picture yourself as a small child, 5, 6, 7 years of age, whatever comes to mind from that period of your life. Just hold that picture now. And we're going to address that child, your own self, your own inner child. If you have trouble picturing it or getting a mental image, and then just feel it. Feel what it was like to be a 6, 7-year-old child. And speak to your own inner child in the following way. I am your adult self. I want you to know that I have been with you since the time of birth. I will be with you when you leave this planet. And from birth to death, I will always be here. I need you to know I will always be here for you. Other people may come and go, even parents and siblings, friends, acquaintances, but I will always be here. There's nothing you have to do to earn that support from me. It is freely given. It is natural. It could not be any other way. I want you to know that you are 100% completely and absolutely forgiven for anything that you have ever thought, any deed that you have ever committed, that in any way harmed anybody else, or indeed yourself. You are completely and absolutely forgiven. There's nothing you need to do to earn that forgiveness. It is freely given. Receive it freely. I want you to know that you are loved unconditionally. There's nothing you can do to earn that love. It is freely given. It is naturally given. There is no other way for me to be but to love you perfectly. I want you to know that I know what your needs and your wants are. Let me, the adult, take care of them. Your job as a child is to simply be alive, be vibrant in the moment, and enjoy. I, as an adult, can take care of adult things. I want you to know that from this moment forward, I am assuming the parental role, the role of mom and dad. There is nobody on this earth who knows you better than I do, who knows exactly what you need. I will take care of that, and we will release mom and dad from those responsibilities. From this moment forward, I am now assuming the role of parent of you, my own inner child. I want you to know that at all times I am present with you. You can tap into my presence anytime. Be still and know that I am here. I have loved you from before you were born. I will love you after the time of death. You and I are one. All is forgiven. You are completely accepted exactly as you are. Nothing needs to be said or done to garnish that acceptance. It is freely given. Now we want to spend a little time staying with those feelings of acceptance, forgiveness, unconditional love, peace, and serenity. And we'll just let us use the chanting and the music to be still, free from thinking, and just soaking in these beautiful feelings. Just take a moment and say the following with me. I am loved. I am forgiven. I am loved. I am forgiven. I am peace. I am at one. I am loved. I am forgiven. I am at one. I am peace. I am at one. I am forgiven. I am loved. Now let's bring our awareness back to our breath for a moment. Just breathing in deeply to the count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Release the breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Breathe normally. Now just bring your attention back to the here and now. I live in a physical body, and feel that body. Feel your feet touching the ground, or if you're lying down, your ankles touching the floor. Feel your seat. Feel your bottom sitting on the seat and the support that it brings. Feel your head sitting atop your shoulders in perfect support. And realize that the things we just spoke about, the awareness of forgiveness, the awareness of acceptance, the awareness of love, is simply sitting here, always. It always has been, and it always will be. I have the choice to access it at any time I choose. This concludes our meditation today. Just come awake whenever you are ready. Open your eyes. And please continue to practice this time with yourself on a daily basis, whether it's for 2 minutes or 5 or 30 minutes or an hour. Be at peace with yourself on a daily basis. I thank you for this opportunity of being with you now, of bringing this message to you. I will see you soon. Namaste, my friend.
Thank you, Frank, for the meditation today on the subject of forgiveness. Another wonderful meditation. And talking about meditation, you're going to be doing some more meditating in a wider context again soon.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention we're starting here in Petaluma on the 11th of April at One Mind Dharma Center, a program of mindfulness meditation, Celtic mindfulness, in which it's designed for brand new people. But it's also designed for people who have been meditating for a long period of time. It's open to everybody, but we'll have a very simple approach. And just like what we've done here week after week after week, we will use the music and the mindful playing of instruments, the flute, and also the chanting, because that is a beautiful way to easily come into mindfulness and let the thinking mind rest. So that program will start on the 11th of April, Wednesday, at One Mind Dharma at 7 p.m. If you want any further information, you'll see it coming up both on my Facebook and on One Mind Dharma, and also reach out to either myself or Dana.
And reach out to if you think that you have a venue that you like to see Celtic mindfulness happen, because we're continuously on the lookout for that in a wider context. That can be in San Francisco, Sacramento, anywhere. Really worth. I was in a wonderful venue yesterday, perhaps a little large for the concept, but I was in Grace Cathedral.
Oh, beautiful.
Beautiful location that what you do would work really well, but that's an aspiration. Let's
Also,
put it out
you
there.
just, tweaked my mind there too. If somebody out there would like a meditation and has a group of 5 or 6 people, I'll come to your home and we will do meditation. Mindfulness, Celtic mindfulness with the music, just like we do on the podcast. So please feel free to reach out to us. The number doesn't have to be huge. I mean, if we have 5 to 10 people, we can certainly make that happen.
Well, you've just been listening to another Lighthouse Wellness Community podcast. My name is Donald McCool.
My name is Frank O'Connor. Namaste. Thank you, everybody.